Welcome to Tamer Bowling Video Ball Reviews. If you like what we do, please support us by joining our Patreon page. Alright, welcome back everybody. So, I'm asked frequently what my personal arsenal is. I'll preface by saying just because I select a ball doesn't mean everyone has to have it, nor does it invalidate your own personal arsenal. It simply means this is the way I chose to fill the bag to best compete. Now, I've spent some time in the favorites series explaining how I create an arsenal and some of my favorites in those categories. Just to refresh your memory, it's composed of the following. We have the strong defined category, strong control, mid-defined, mid-control, mid-late, and then a weak wildcard urethane, whatever, number 6 slot. So with that said, my bag currently looks like this. I have the Roto Grip UFO, the Storm Phaze 2, the Roto Grip Nuclear Cell, the Radical Squatch Hybrid, the Brunswick Melee Jab SE, and the Storm Pitch Purple. So let's start with the strong defined first. Here I have the UFO. I've alternated the Omega Crux in there at times, trying to see if it fits the same way. I personally like sanded pearls at the top and have had good experience with this in the past using Storm Intense, for example. I did have the 900 Global Volatility in this slot for a while. And while I have to admit, I was probably heading towards being a huge favorite for a long time, it did settle down quite a bit, and it started to approach the shape of the strong control category, losing some of the down lane definition. But when it was in the bag, it got tons of use week in, week out on sport shots of any length, basically. Now, with the UFO or Omega Crux, they actually get much less use in that slot than the volatility did when it was in the slot. And that's because they have stronger down lane shapes. So, at the end of the day, I just haven't had as much need for both strong through the mids and strong down lane reaction. And that may say something in general about bag construction where the most use comes in. Moving on to the strong control category, which is currently filled with the Phaze 2. This slot will likely get a good amount of use for most people, and I personally have no issues here with my selection. This ball fits perfectly, and while I have a few balls that can fit here, this is my personal favorite right now. The one issue with the Phaze 2 is that out of the box, it starts off extremely strong. So I have to get 20 or 30 games on it before it really fits in this category properly. But then it fits perfectly. And honestly, I agonized about it for a long time. I want to use it, but I can't fit it in. How do I get these 20 games on? But eventually it happened. The Axiom is another ball that easily fits here. But again, I still think the Phaze 2 is my personal pick. The other ball I mentioned in the other videos was the Volatility. I really like that ball, but because it's settled, like I mentioned, it sort of lost its place in the arsenal where the right balls in these categories are the ones I currently have, and the Volatility kind of became the odd man out. It may wind up being a specialty ball or an extra ball above the 6 ball arsenal to give me a different look. The next category, mid-defined, is easily filled with the Roto Grip Nuclear Cell. It was my number 1 in my favorites video, and I love the shape. I will say it's probably stronger, a stronger shape down lane than I usually like, but it's so trustworthy, and it's kind of a no-brainer. It gets down lane cleaner than the UFO, and still has the turn, that hard turn down lane. It just works for me, and now remember, I do see a lot of balls, and I do mix and match brands for my arsenal, as you'll see coming up. With that said, one of my favorite looks in a long time is the Radical Zing Hybrid. And when you think about arsenal building, relationships of balls are important. And while I love the Nuclear Cell, part of me is wondering if the Zing Hybrid will link the upcoming balls better if I fit that ball in this slot in the future. With that said, let's discuss the Radical Squatch Hybrid that fills the mid-control slot for me. This is an interesting one. I love this ball. It really does an excellent job blending wet-dry from the left side. And despite being shiny out of the box, it just seems to still blend so well. I'm not a big fan of shiny in general, and I would say especially in this slot. But this ball easily fits here, which should tell you how much I like it and how well it works. After initial testing, I tried 2000 surface on the spinner, and it really wasn't happy. I disliked that reaction, significantly. But subsequently, I decided to go to 1000 Abalone hard on a spinner, and then using step 1 Storm compound to have a little shine, but with good underlying grit. And the reaction was back. I've run into an issue before with some balls not seeming to like their final finish being off of the spinner. The Triton Elite was famous for that in my bag before this. Actually, in the same slot, surprisingly. Or maybe not surprisingly. But by hand, surface made it a very different story. So I like the Squatch Hybrid as is for now, and despite appearing to be a big step down from the Phaze 2, it is working in real practice for me. I'll just add a comment that I really am finding a good matchup of Radical balls and my game from the left side. With the way they blend the cliff, which is really critical, they make my life easier, from the left side or the wrong side, whatever you want to call it, especially when we ultimately can't break it down and the cliff is very defined. The next ball covers the mid-late category, and that is the Brunswick Melee Jab SE. I love this ball. I've enjoyed it since the original jab a couple years back. This slot is not that far off from the strength of the Squatch Hybrid for me, but when you want to be more direct, the Squatch Hybrid is perfect with the way it blends the pattern. The Melee Jab SE might be decent at blending, but it really shines when you want shape in this scenario. So it really is a perfect step down in my mind to the Squatch Hybrid. Bottom line, it's not gonna blend the wet dry quite as well as, say, the Squatch Hybrid, but the Jab SE works much better opening up the lane. Again, in real practice, this has worked beautifully in this slot. The next slot I'll just call wildcard. That has been one I've gone back and forth with. Right now, it's filled with a Storm Pitch Purple. For me, I basically plan to use this slot as a urethane ball in case the pattern calls for it, while I also use it for spares. However, I'm debating plugging in a more traditional urethane shape like a pitch black or purple hammer or even a hot cell, as the shape is both easier to my eye for use as both spare shooting and strike shots. Even the covert tank might make it back in the bag, as I like that shape a lot. In the past couple of years, I've changed my arsenal quite frequently, basically on a weekly basis, and truthfully, it's hurt my scores. I've tried to showcase a new ball here and there, but as I worked my way through the sort of preparation for this year's Favorites series, I had my own light bulb moment, and at least came to realization that, 1, I need to land on an arsenal with a simple design, and 2, if I want to swap, they need to squarely fit in that slot. For house shots on the left side, I pretty much stick with this bag when we're actually bowling anyway. I guess we'll eventually get back, God willing. What I work on is how best to manage cliff shots. So I err towards shot preservation. That means I try to use equipment that will not chew up the front, chew up the pattern. And that generally means avoiding strong balls, which absorb oil from the fronts and the mids, as well as avoiding, low flaring or urethane balls that will carry oil down and ultimately destroy the corner of the pattern. So I find myself working the mid-control ball for as long as possible, and then typically go up to either the mid-defined, where you want to move in and still get shape, or move down to mid-late, depending on how the pattern's breaking down. And that seems to work. Of course, from week to week, things can be different, hence the purpose and preparedness of having an arsenal. The last thing you want is to expect that a weak ball works every week and then get surprised by a flood, for example. I do bowl on sport shots weekly throughout the year, and as such, do occasionally slide the scale. In other words, if I'm on a long, high volume pattern where mid, late, or weak is not likely to come into play, I might just remove them from the bag that week or that tournament and add another ball or two up the chain. For example, I might bring the UFO and volatility and even the Mega Crux in front of the Phaze 2, just to give me more nuanced shape in the top side of the bag. Or I might also add a short pin ball to add a nuanced shape. I might slide in a high road pearl if it's a lower volume pattern where the bottom end of the bag might get more use. There was a look at my current arsenal construction. Hope you enjoyed this series, and thanks for watching.